You know, I didn't get a chance to talk about this, just like Jeff of OTR Central. I didn't get a chance to talk about it when it happened, but, because I've, of course, as you saw in the last video, sorry about that. In a bit of a burp there. But as you saw in the last video, as I mentioned, I've been working now over at Target in Turlock, so there's the proof right there. So I haven't really a chance to talk about this at all. I could have talked about it yesterday, which is when I'm recording this. I could have talked about this yesterday, but I was so tired. I did not want to get out of bed, guys. I mean, I got up a couple of times, had to take out the recycling, check a few things, but I did not want to get out of bed. That is the honest truth. I did not, let me make sure the mic's on, okay. I just want to make sure the mic's on, but like I said, I did not want to get out of bed. I was just so tired, just so out of it. And basically I wanted to wait until I had time to do this. And I figured, well, now is a better time than ever. But yeah, on NXT on Tuesday night, well, before that as well, reports came out courtesy of Fightful.com and WrestleVotes and Sean Ross Sapp that WWE had filed the trademark for the name Gunther Stark. And over time, as I adjust my seat there, over time throughout the day, people were wondering why would they be filing a trademark for this name. And then that's when it hit them exactly what this name meant, or who this name belonged to originally. And to say it stirred up a lot of controversy and a lot of backlash for WWE is saying a lot. So what happened on Tuesday night after the main event between Walter and Roderick Strong was over, it was announced. Well, basically what happened is the ring announcer was going to declare Walter the winner until he grabbed the mic and he said, "Nay, the winner of the match is Gunther." And as soon as people heard that coming out of Walter's mouth, that pretty much, confirmed what a lot of them feared. The WWE was going to go full on throttle with this. Well, that's what people thought. And they still have a right to think that. But what happened recently, over the past 48 hours, or 72 hours, I should say, is WWE obviously, got a lot of backlash due to this controversial move, and they basically decided to withdraw filing the trademark for Gunther Stark. Yeah, they basically null and voided the trademark filing for the name Gunther Stark, and just are going to go with calling him Gunther instead. Now, there's been a lot of folks that have been back and forth about this. I mean, JUSTALYX he was in shock. Alex Hick, formerly the Lex Man. JD from NY206, always outspoken, and that's why people like his channel, and that's why I'm a fan of his channel. He's not afraid to say what he wants to say, even if you don't agree with him, even if you feel he's a shield, a sellout, whatever. He gave his opinions on it, as well as a lot of other people. But what was funny is there were some, like let's say OTRSCENTRAL, Jeff Siegel, that he could. Well, basically the way Jeff put it in the video at OTRSCENTRAL was, he can understand where fans were coming from, especially after doing some research. But he could also kind of look at it like, we're at a point in wrestling that despite the fact that, we have a good alternative in the likes of AEW and Impact and GCW, that overall wrestling has become so stagnant outside of that we look for anything to talk about when it comes to wrestling. Anything that's going to keep our interest in wrestling, mostly with the WWE, relevant. And he talked about this. And obviously there were some people that did agree with his point of view, and some like Alex that didn't. Because they feel that, hey, You have a right to your opinion. You have a right to know, to say how you feel. But when you really think about it, look what that name, or look who used that name originally. Now, when Jeff did his video, he tried to argue the fact that this Gunther Stark may have been a German lieutenant U-boater, if you will, of a U-boat, if you will. But there was no way he could have ties to Nazism, or he have no ties in alliance to Hitler. While others like Alex later on would try to counter that by saying, no, you're wrong, because when you sign up for the military, no matter what country it is, you're basically you're basically swearing allegiance to the person running the country. In this case, let's say, somebody was to, sign up for the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever here in the U.S., not only would you be signing up to, signing up for the right and the opportunity to, defend the country you live for, defend your family and friends, fight for your country, but you'd also be signing up to pledge allegiance not to our freedom and everything of the United States, but you'd be pledging allegiance to the president himself, to our leader himself, that being Joe Biden. And whether you like Biden or not, if you sign up, to serve in the military, you're essentially, besides everything I just mentioned, pledging allegiance to a guy that maybe you don't feel deserves to be in the White House, but yet you are pledging your loyalty to him, along with your country. And that's what people like Alex tried to point out, to counteract what Jeff was saying. That basically, when you sign up, if you're a German military person signing up for the military in their neck of the woods, you're essentially signing up not just to fight for your country there, but you're also fighting to pledge allegiance, but you're also pledging allegiance to that country's leader. In this case, what Alex is trying to point out, and others, I think, to try to counteract what Jeff and others that agreed with him were saying, is that this German U-boater, this lieutenant German U-boater, true, maybe he didn't have ties directly to Nazism, or even had, a liking for someone like Hitler. But if you're signing up to defend your country, you're essentially signing up to pledge allegiance, not just for that country and fighting for it, but you're pledging your loyalty to Hitler himself. I think that's what Alex was trying to point out. Now look, everybody's going to have their different points of view when it comes to this name change. And whether or not it was a smart move by WWE to do, that's going to be something for them to decide in the future. Because there is no doubt that even if they change the name to Gunther, people are going to know. People are going to know exactly, who that name originally belonged to from a historical standpoint. Now, some may say that because it was such a long time ago, and not everybody from both sides from all sides of the military during World War II were well known. There's going to be a lot of people that will look at that and say, okay, fine, you bring up a good point, but how many people nowadays, young kids and all that, are going to know who Gunther Stark was? And I think that's what some people are trying to argue. Like, hey, we get what you're saying, but how many people are going to know who this guy was? And I think that's why WWE, in their infamous wisdom, if you will, decided to rename Walter that. Because they probably, they didn't probably, I don't know what the issue was, but they probably, in a sense, knew maybe that it belonged to a World War II guy from representing the Germans and Nazis, but probably figured that since it's been so long and Gunther Stark is not that well known outside of someone like Hitler, then nobody's going to know. And unfortunately, if that was the thought process, just my opinion, they seem to forget that there's a little thing called the internet. There's a little thing called Google, a little thing called Bing, if you will, that allow people to search and, find find out historical information. And, lo and behold, they find out exactly who Gunther Stark was, and it's come back to bite WWE. But again, assuming, giving them the benefit of the doubt, I know that's hard to do, assuming that maybe the thought process was nobody would know, it's come to bite them in the ass. Now, whatever plans they probably had originally for Walter under the Gunther name, maybe they're going to have to, if not already, going to have to scrap and go with something different. My opinion is this. My opinion is this. I think what they'll do, and again, I know it's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I think what they'll do is they'll probably rewrite a new kind of reasoning for him becoming Gunther. Maybe he'll come out, and say while he was away, getting ready to move to the U.S. and all that while he was away, packing up, he learned more about his history, about his ancestry, found out about this great ancestor of his that fought in the military, but doesn't say which, time frame of military, and decides that he's going to rename himself. He's going to rechristen himself after that ancestor, after that great-great-grandfather or whatever. They could do that. They could just say he, researched his family history while he was away, saw that, he had an ancestor, a great-great-grandfather that, served in the military, but doesn't have to say what military, and decides in honor of him, he's going to rechristen himself Gunther. And that's it. And I could be wrong, but I think that would be the best. I think obviously WWE may figure that could be the best direction to go in when it comes to trying to pass this Gunther name off for Walter. Now, like I said, basically, is this something that WWE, no, like I said, is this something WWE did because they figured nobody would know? Probably, if they did some research, giving them the benefit of the doubt. But like I said, it's kind of like what people like Jeff and others have been pointing out. Yeah, it was a stupid move, but how many people are going to know about this guy? And when they do the research, how many of them are going to look at the fact that, yeah, he served for Germany, but he wasn't exactly what people fear him to be, or fear he was to be. So, it's just, the way I look at it is just a matter of preference, a matter of how you look at it. And again, I totally agree. It is a controversial move for them to make. I mean, if this is a Bruce Pritchard idea, because Bruce Pritchard has now taken full control behind the scenes of NXT, if it is a Bruce Pritchard idea, obviously Bruce is doing what he can in his mind to get attention back on WWE and on NXT. And if he can bring in an anti-American character that has German Nazi roots, but not really allude to it, because now they got to change things up, to get people to watch the product, then so be it. He'll do it. He will do it. But here's what I look at. Here's what I look at, folks. I don't think this Gunther thing's going to stick. I think the moment he goes to the main roster, and, if he ends up on Raw or he ends up on SmackDown, he is basically going to, I'll say this. The moment he shows up under the Gunther name on Raw or SmackDown, that's when WWE is going to get the message of, oh, we shouldn't have done this either way. That's when they're going to get the message, and they're just going to change him back to Walter. Like, you could have him, come out one week, acknowledge that he's back, he's now Walter again, and they found out the, ancestor he named himself after was not really part of the family, and he was a, he basically was a phony and all that, and, stuff. You just, knowing WWE, they'll try to come up with some kind of excuse to justify the fact that Walter is back to being Walter after the negative backlash they may end up getting on the Raw and SmackDown rosters, on Raw and SmackDown, depending on which show he'll be on. But again, it's just one of those moves that, I think Alex and JD and everybody else said it best. It's one of those moves that WWE knows that if they do it, despite how controversial it may be, despite whether or not they knew what that name or who that name belonged to originally, they did it because they know it's going to get people talking. And if it gets people reacting and talking, and basically bashing them for making a stupid decision, in WWE's mind, they've done their job because they're getting people's attention on them now and away from places like AEW. And that's essentially what it is. Is if they can make a decision like this and get, the eyes off of AEW, off the competition and onto them, they'll do it. They will do it. And whether or not this sticks, it's up to them. I know some people are saying you're making too much of a big deal about it. But, that's just a matter of people's preference and opinions. It's just a matter of opinion. It really is. But, I don't know. I mean, WWE's made some stupid mistakes before. I mean, one thing a lot of people bring up in comparison to this is Muhammad Hassan. And for a while, Muhammad Hassan, even though he was anti-American and all that, he wasn't looked at as a threat. He wasn't looked at as something that, should be taken off the air immediately. It wasn't until they did that angle with him, an Undertaker, on the SmackDown that aired basically the day of those London bombings, those London terrorist bombings, that they decided to axe the character, because the angle they did is basically they had a group of guys in ski masks beat Undertaker down, choke him with some piano wire, and then carry Daivari off as a martyr. And that was enough for UPN to say, no, we don't want this character, and if you show this character back up again on our show, we will take SmackDown off the air. So what did they do? They took Muhammad off until the Great American Bash pay-per-view, had Undertaker beat him, and then literally had Undertaker kill him by, in storyline that is, by powerbombing him through the stage and straight to hell. And that's it. And that's it. That was the end of Muhammad Hassan. We had not seen him in WWE ever since. The last time he made a wrestling appearance was about a couple of years ago. And he actually got cheered because people were like, yes, we're getting Muhammad Hassan. And it's the reason they got, and the reason they were happy to see him, is because of the fact that, Muhammad has come out in very astute interviews and explained his side of the story. He explained that, when they were travel, because basically Vince's mentality still was you got to keep in character, you got to stay in character, especially if you're a heel or something. That when he and Daivari would walk through the airports, or they would walk through the parks where they were staying, people would walk away from them in fear. Some would, in fact, Muhammad said that Shelton Benjamin at one time told him that people were in the back because they saw him sitting in the front. He was wearing the turban and all that. That people in the back were calling up the family saying that they loved them and everything because they thought him and Daivari were there, as terrorists. So yeah, WWE, they do take a chance on some of these things. But we have to remember that Muhammad Hassan's situation, it was controversial, but it really wasn't, taken to those depths of, okay, we can't have this character on television or else it's going to hurt us, business-wise and financially, and even, broadcast-wise. It didn't get to that point until they did that angle. And that was it. I mean, let's take a look at the Un-Americans. They wore the flag upside down on their shirts. They threatened to burn the flag in Madison Square Garden. Yeah, there's a lot of people that took that offensive, but it wasn't. But here's the thing. It wasn't so offensive that these guys were taken off the air. Or they came out and, kind of tore the curtain down and said, look, you see how desperate Vince McMahon is? Or how old, out of touch Vince McMahon is? He's got us doing this. They didn't do that. They kept it around as long as they could. Same with Rusev. They could have done the same thing with Rusev, but they didn't. Who's Miro right now in AEW. They could have done the same thing with him, but they didn't. The point is WWE has a history of going the anti-American route, and sometimes it is a very thin, edgy, controversial line to go across when it comes to certain characters they want to choose. And if they want to rename certain characters with a different name, sometimes that is taking a risk because you don't know whether or not that name has historical significance, or if it does, yet if it does, but it's not the kind of historical significance that people will recognize. It's just one of those situations right now that WWE, they're gonna have no one but themselves to blame. And the only way I think Gunther is gonna really survive on the main roster, if it, let's say he goes to SmackDown, is, you know, again, they just come up with a storyline to replace the one they were originally going to do, and basically have him say that he changed his name in honor of an ancestor of his that fought in a great war, and he's not going to say what war that was, you know, served in a great battle or great war for the military, for the Austria military. That's the only way you can get around it, and, you know, go from there. I mean, like I said, whatever plans they had originally, they got to scrap those and come up with something different. And if one of those ways is Walter saying, "Hey, I renamed myself, rechristened myself Gunther out of honor of my great-great-grandfather who served in the Austria military," then so be it. So be it. That might be the only saving grace they have. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, because if that's the only saving grace they have, and yet Walter goes to SmackDown or Raw, and it backfires on them because people will be like, "We know who this is, or we know who this name belonged to, we know the truth about it," then the best scenario they're going to have to deal with is Walter coming out maybe a month or so after doing the character, you know, and doing, I guess you could say, a work shoot or whatever, or some kind of made-up story by saying he's going back to Walter because he found out that this guy he's naming himself after was not part of the family, he was a fraud. That'd be the only way they could do it. But yeah, is it a controversial move on WWE's part? Absolutely. Is it going to bite them in the butt once he goes to the main roster? Probably. But I will say this, whatever stories they come up with to take the place of the original story they were going to do, it better be a good one, and it better be one that even Fox, if Walter goes to SmackDown, will be acceptable of going forward. But we'll see. But let me know what your thoughts are. How do you feel about, you know, Walter becoming Gunther? You know, do you think WWE is taking a big risk with this? How do you see this going in the future? How do you see this playing out for them? Do you think it's a situation to where they did research, but they realize, hey, not everybody's going to know who he is? You know, what are your thoughts? Let me know down below, as well as in the comment section during the premiere. Like the video. Super chats and super stickers are encouraged if you can do it during the live chat of the premiere. Also check me out at my Teespring store. Also check me out at BW Roses on all your favorite, or BW Roses discussions, I should say, on all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at BW Roses on Venmo. Also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2 to help donate there. As well as check me out at patreon.com/BW Roses to help support me there with the $1 or $3 tier. And until next time, guys, again, let me know what your thoughts are. Because again, this might either totally backfire on them, or maybe WWE is going to find a way to, you know, create a loophole that, you know, allows them to keep the name, but, you know, just barely, because maybe they have to come up with a different storyline for it than the original. But let me know what your thoughts are, and I'm out.